indeed today. And thank you very much for joining us so early in the morning. I know you've been up for quite some time due to your jet lag, but thank you very much. We met last night over a marvellous dinner at Shipping Tour. So I know all about you. But if you don't mind giving me a little explanation for our listeners here about Chateau Gilette and your connections, your family connections to the Sauternes business.
Yes. So Chateau Gilette is a very small chateau in Sauternes. So it covers 4 hectares and a half. So it's very little property. The chateau is in my family since 3 centuries. So it's a very long time. And we have a very special way of working in Gillette because we release and sell our wines after 20 years. Actually, the youngest vintage we have is 85. We have a big particularity is that we don't use oak. We let our wines during 15, 18 years in cement tank, never oak. We don't want the taste of oak.
And when was that decision made to keep the wines for 20 years before aging? Because your family has been in the Sauternes business for quite some time.
Very long time. So at the beginning it was an accident. My grandfather went to the Second War. So during this time there was no wood to make barrel, no money to buy barrels, so the wines were stocked in cement tank. So we told to my grandmother, please don't touch the wine, you let them in the tank. We'll see when I will come back. So when he came back some years after, he had no more money and no more to a barrel, so he let his wines 7 or 8 years in the cement tank, and when he tasted this, it's very interesting, it's very fresh and very young, and he decided at this moment to keep the wines by this way, and so with my father they decided to keep around 15-18 years in cement tank. They thought that with all the flavors and all the aromas of botrytis, you have taste of vanillin and wood, so you need the barrel, and we avoid the micro-oxidation of the barrel. We have only the aging and not the oxidation.
I understand. Now, would that not be a big financial investment to keep your wine for 20 years before selling it?
Yes.
How did you survive for those first 20 years?
Yes.
Because you said there was no money, so...
Yes, but he was like, my grandmother has some money by another side, so...
So family is independently wealthy.
Yes. So, but it's true that I think it was difficult and very difficult to do now, because the economy is most difficult. So I'm happy that he had begun. Now it's easier now. Yes, when it's ever done, it's easier to continue.
Now, when you talk about cement tanks, you're not talking of raw cement. You're not talking about a porous cement material. There's actually an epoxy on the side of the tank.
The idea is that the tank gives no taste to the wine. So it's alimentary.
So it's neutral.
It's completely neutral. Yes.
Now, how are the tanks sealed at the top? I've never seen these tanks.
So we fill completely the tanks, and so when we close, so we put the wine when it is finished after the alcoholic fermentation. So the wine is finished, it's filtered, and we put it in the tank, and we fill completely, and we close, and we never touch during all the aging. So
how many tanks, these cement tanks, do you have of any one vintage at any one time, approximately?
We have 1 tank per vintage.
Per vintage?
Because, as I explained, it's very small, it's 4 hectares and a half. We have very low yield, it's under the 10 hectoliters, so it's very few, it's around 40 or 50 hectoliters. It's not a big tank. And, but we don't produce every year, only when you can make crème de tête, which is the best that we can produce with the most beautiful botrytis. So I have 10 tanks, 10 or 11 in depends.
10 or 11 tanks from the last 20 years. Yes. Now, these, let's call them off vintages, when you do not make the crème de tête, what kind of wines do you make?
So, in the time of my grandfather, he makes Sauternes quite every year, but he has different levels. So the top is crème de tête, and there you have the doux, So it's sweet, demi-doux, half sweet, demi-sec, half dry and sec. All these levels are Sauternes but are less concentrated. So, but since '62 my father has decided to make only crème de tête.
Oh.
So when we now, if I don't produce Gillette, I sell it in vrac. I don't know if you understand.
I understand, yes, yeah. Yes. So, which, in the last, let's say in the last 20 years, how many you're saying 9 vintages right now?
I have in the cellar, in tank I have 2005, 2003, 2002, 2001. I think the oldest I have in a tank is 88, and we are bottling it next month. So we want to let the wine quite 1 year before releasing it, because the bottling is very strong, very hard for the wine.
It's not the easiest way to make and market wine, is it? To keep it for 20. And one thing that I find interesting about Sauternes is Sauternes, despite it being one of the world's finest wines, and one of the most highly thought of wines, I would say, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but my observations have been the Sauternes producers and the Balzac producers have not been the best at marketing the product recently. Do you have any comments regarding that?
No, you are right. It's yes, you are right. It's a small area, and it's true that the people are not very used to travel and to explain our work. And it's true. I think it's one of the most sophisticated and complex wine in the world. But it is very magical. We are very lucky to produce this kind of wines. But it's true that you see Bordeaux, it's particular because you have the Place de Bordeaux with the negociant. So a lot of producers never do business, never do.
It's only ever through the
yes. So, but we have never sold by negociants.
Your own wine under your own.
We have always sell directly, and it's much more work. But I think it's good to meet people and consumers all over the world.
No, I mean there is one. I mean, I always think that the sweeter wines in the world, and at the highest end, such as yourself and Cam and Clément and German Trockenbier and Auschwitzer and the like, I always think the marketing is somewhat lacking because they are the best wines in their genre, shall we say, in their field. They are the best sweet wines in the world. However, they never achieve the same kind of price point as, say, a first growth from the left bank or from Pomerol. They never seem to achieve the same amount of money. I always think they're amazing value-wise because people don't realize how important these wines are on the world stage. But I was reading a little story about Sauternes recently, and there was a British wine writer saying he felt one of the reasons that Sauternes is not as prominent as he feels it should be is because there's very little solidarity between the producers in Sauternes, such as in Bordeaux. When you're talking about red Bordeaux, there are many